Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Faith and Finance Forum, hosted by the Catholic Finance Association and presented by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We have a wonderful show this morning. We have Jim Keyes with us, the former CEO of Blockbuster and 7-Eleven. He's got a new book out called Education is Freedom, and we're going to talk about a lot of great stuff with Jim today. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well, thanks. Good morning.
Great to have you. Let's open with a prayer, shall we? In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Saint James, pray for us. Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Well, Jim, welcome. You are in the middle of a very busy week for you. You just launched your book yesterday, Education is Freedom. Talk to us about how the book launch went.
It was a lot of fun. The reception has been fascinating. I run into everything from people that are saying, I've always said that, and thank you, bless you for getting the word out because we need it today more than ever before. To the other side, people that are saying, education is not important anymore. It doesn't matter. You're wasting your breath. Kids shouldn't even go to school. So I've got the whole spectrum of opinions, and I think that what that says to me is my story and my call to action is probably more important than ever before.
Well, what is your story and call to action? Let's summarize that.
Sure. It basically the book is called Education is Freedom, and I'll share with you a little bit about how I got to that title. But the subtitle is The Future is in Your Hands. And this means both literally and figuratively. Yes, the school system's challenged today, the public school system. Yes, there are issues with our post-secondary school system and cost, et cetera, et cetera. But there is so much power of knowledge and learning literally in your hands with technology available today to supplement your education. And so for the individual, it's critically important to take matters in your own hands, your own learning. But stepping back from it, so much of what we deal with in society today is based on fear. And that fear is caused by ignorance, candidly, the lack of knowledge. That is what we're trying to address for society as a whole, to embrace learning and embrace knowledge as the antidote to fear and let us rise above some of these silly things that we're fighting about, candidly.
But Jim, we're a society that spends so much on education, and it's such a fixture in our culture. I mean, every family I know, every set of parents I know that has children talks incessantly about where their kids go to school, where they want them to go to school, etc. If education is such a focus of our society, why do you consider it such a challenge?
It has always been a focus. In fact, I had someone recently say, well, Jim, look at World War II. You know, we sent eighth graders, guys with an eighth grade education into war, and they won. But what was forgotten is that much of America's success post World War II came from the GI Bill, and those guys with an eighth grade education coming home, going to college, and being very well educated, ending up taking our economy to unseen levels before, and our corporations to global success. So it really is very attributable to our education. Yes, we spend a lot, but what we haven't yet done is to embrace the transformation of education that must occur. We're still teaching the way we did 100 years ago, blackboards, books, a standardized system, a bell curve. All of these things can change with the power of technology, but we have to embrace the need for that change, invest in that transformation. It's not unlike what I faced at 7-Eleven or Blockbuster, the need for a dramatic business transformation using technology to take the company, or in this case, our country or our world, to the next level.
Well, let's diagnose the problem a little bit more. I mean, surely the issue with our current educational system can't just be that we've been doing it the same way for a long time. What are the specific challenges, issues, problems that you are trying to fix and transform, to borrow your words?
I think the key is the need for a total redo of the tools that we use, the tools for learning. We, for example, during COVID, during the pandemic, we were forced to deal with online learning. Well, we were ill prepared for it. So some people look at that period and say, what a miserable failure. It was a terrible experience. Kids didn't learn, etc. I look at it and say, what a huge benefit. The silver lining in that cloud is we accelerated access to technology by as much as 20 years. Dallas Fort Worth, just an example, the public school system had less than 30% of the kids that had Wi-Fi access. Today, it's like 95 because companies like AT&T stepped up with Wi-Fi hotspots. Companies like Dell or Apple stepped up with laptops. So now we have these connected kids. What we didn't have during the pandemic is an integrated, user-friendly, robust education software platform. There were various entities out there, but nothing that was as compelling as we need. That's the next step, and that transformation will happen over time. My call to action is for companies to step back and say, wait a minute, we're the demand for an educated workforce. We got a problem with supply. It's dwindling, and it's getting worse and worse. We therefore should step up as corporations, help with this investment in a technology transformation of the way we teach and learn, and then we'll have a better supply of educated workers. I think that's the answer. And that's my call to action in the book for corporations to recognize the importance for them to step up.
Yeah, and it's an inspiring call. I wonder, what about the education ecosystem that's in place in this country, the system of public and private schools, the teachers profession, the teachers union, these big institutions that have a significant stake in the status quo when it comes to education. Do you expect that they will be partners, allies in the agenda you'd like to implement, or do you think they'll be more resistant?
It's never going to be easy.
Yeah.
And I've lived through these kinds of transformations, and perhaps it's not the same scale, but Blockbuster was a pretty big entity, and 7-Eleven a pretty big entity, and we had franchisees that were pretty entrenched. Franchisees and labor unions, not all different. They've
Yeah,
got
right.
a fierce sense of independence. We're going to do this the way we've done it in the past.
Sure.
And so it really comes down to leadership. And this is what's so critically important. We have to step up and take the leadership and show a better way. If we just go in and say, we don't like the way you're doing it, we want to fire you, we want to put in metrics to make you perform better, of course there's going to be resistance. If we come in and say, look at these tools that will help change the way you ignite excitement and curiosity in your students. I don't know a teacher that doesn't do it. They certainly don't do it for the money, most of them. I don't know one that doesn't do it for the passion around, I want to help kids learn ultimately. And yes, the union is a layer of a challenge, but we can excite the teachers with the ability to teach better. And I'm very confident that capability is coming.
All right. Well, let's table the education conversation to later in the program and get to know you a little bit better. Jim Keys, you have had a remarkable run. It would be noteworthy to be the CEO of one big Fortune 500 company. You've been the CEO of at least two and done a lot of other interesting and important work in the corporate world and the world of philanthropy. Let's talk about your early life, your upbringing. Where'd you grow up? What was your family like? Anything you'd like to share?
Sure, I grew up in pretty humble surroundings. I didn't grow up a Catholic. My mom was Catholic, my dad was Baptist. And so I was a little choir boy in the Baptist church. And grew up in a pretty challenging family environment, too many kids, too little money, literally 3-room house, outhouse, you can imagine. Walking through the snow to the outhouse in Massachusetts was not a whole lot of fun. My mom had enough of that, split. When I was 5 years old, she said, I'm going upscale to the trailer park. and she just bailed out on us. But here's the blessing inside of that. I had 6 years with my father in a one-on-one little boy dad relationship that wouldn't have happened but for that. And because I had those 6 years with my dad, he ended up passing when I was 12. So I cherish that time together. And I think, ultimately it was a crisis. Yes, it was adversity. Yes, but it was a blessing inside of that adversity that I had that time together. Then I had the opportunity to go and be with my mom at that point, and she introduced me to the Catholic faith. I was able to convert into the Catholic faith. I had my friends were jealous because I had my first communion, baptism, and confirmation all within about a 3-month period. So they were all very jealous of me. But that Catholic faith really helped to transform my life and to provide a foundation, a formation that carries with me still today. And you'll find it throughout the book. I try to walk down the path of the book not being political, not being religious, but you'll see my faith throughout the book. And it was a big influence on the cause, on the purpose to try to help elevate everyone and give everyone opportunity.
Wow, Jim, thank you for sharing that, and what a great introduction to the book too. So mom left at a very young age, dad passed away at a very young age. That's a lot for a young person to deal with. I mean, how did you cope with with these challenges?
Like every little kid, I used to sit around and say, why?
Yeah.
How come? Why do I have to deal with this? Not fair. But it helped actually turning to my faith. And as a little kid, even though my dad was Baptist, he took me to church every week, and I saw his faith in action. And then when my mom introduced me to the Catholic faith, it was a completely new dimension, and yet it enhanced my faith. And so what I came to realize, and I wish, and this is a big part of what I try to share in the book, is that when we face adversity, we tend to recoil from it. No one likes change. We think, why me? We feel bad for ourselves. We try to blame other people for the problem. And as in the case of the example with my dad, it turned out to be such a blessing. And I would have never guessed that at the time. I would have said, boy, this is terrible. But I let my faith carry me through. And ultimately that adversity that I faced turned into the blessing that it was. I have had that same experience throughout my life. Even something as simple in the corporate world as joining a company and then finding the whole world fall apart from the financial crisis. That happened at 7-Eleven. It happened again at Blockbuster. But my faith carried me through, and in both cases came out the other side of that challenge with huge learnings and great success.
Yeah, clearly. Wow. I mean, with that tough start, some of the tough breaks you saw early in your life, and of course the modest circumstances, uh, perhaps the smart money wasn't on you becoming a great CEO and corporate leader and author and all things you're doing now. Let's connect those dots a little bit. So from being a teenager with the upbringing you described, how did you get into the world of business?
I was fortunate. I'm gonna credit my Jesuit experience at Holy Cross. I was fortunate enough to go to Holy Cross, and the choice of Holy Cross wasn't. I'll be candid. It wasn't because it was a great Catholic institution. I, for some reason, was mature enough as a child to say, I want to go to the best school that I can afford to, and I can't afford room and board. I'd rather pay the money for tuition. And Holy Cross was within 30 minutes of my home. So I was able to go to Holy Cross and only pay for tuition, living at home. It wasn't an ideal experience, but I still got the quality of education. And at Holy Cross, what I didn't realize until many years later was the power of the formation I received at Holy Cross. It's not blatant. It's not, I didn't attend a lot of classes in theology, or I didn't have a lot of influence from the Jesuits, but subtle influence. And you want to hear a great story? I'll give you
Yes.
one. So I had a Jesuit priest, Father Lapamata. He was, you remember the paper chase?
Yes.
He was that professor. Stand up in class. And if you didn't do your homework, you were in deep trouble. He'd just grill you. And he was tough, and he was sort of notorious. I had him for 2 years in a history class, taught me to write, taught me to think. At the end of the class, after 2 years, he said, where are you going to go to school? And I said, well, I'm going to be a lawyer. And he said, oh, no. So you'll make a terrible lawyer. And I was applying already to law schools. I had gotten into Villanova, applied to 3 or 4 other law schools. He said, "You must promise me you will apply to business school." And I had no frame of reference. Business was the factory my dad worked at. I wanted no part of business, but I had no worldview at all. So he convinced me to apply. Columbia University had just started the JD MBA. He said, "At least apply to this program and you can get both degrees, and then you can choose what you'll want to do." Such profound advice. I ended up at Columbia. The business school let me in. The law school waitlisted me. So I started in reverse, the business school. Ended up getting an internship at Gulf Oil Corporation and never looked back. They said, "Finish the MBA. You don't need the JD." And it really launched my career in business. And it was attributable to Father Lavamada intervening. And it's the power of a teacher. People don't realize every day the influence they can have on your life.
Wow, that is a beautiful story, and you're right. What an impact that that priest had on a young, promising man trying to figure things out. You mentioned a word earlier called you said formation, and of course that's a strong word in the Catholic tradition and other traditions as well. What does that mean to you? Because that's different than academic preparation and education per se, right? Formation means something different, right, Jim?
It does. It does. And as I said, when I wrote the book, I tried to walk down that difficult path of not making it religious or political. So I tried to find other ways to describe formation. And for example, with prayer, which is such an important part of my life, and faith, I used Paulo Coelho, which is, it sounds crazy, but the book The Alchemist. And in The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho describes, if you want something badly enough, if you really want something, the universe will conspire to make it happen. So here is a completely non-denominational way of saying you must have faith. And yet, even though you may have faith, and even though you may pray for something, even though you hope the universe will make it happen, or in our case, that God will intervene, the Holy Spirit will intervene and make it happen, you can't just sit around and wait for it to happen. You have to be proactive to do that. So I use examples like that in the book, and I make the comparison across Buddhism and Islam and all of these other religions that are still grounded in a fundamental faith. And so I try to take that path throughout the book because it's so critically important to help other people with their own formation, even if they're not Catholic.
How important do you think it is for a young person to encounter, you know, I guess education in terms of virtue, morality, ethics, civility, having a good role model. It's long been said, for instance, that education outcomes for those that have a father in their life when they're a child are much better than those that don't. Just comment on that a little bit. I mean, how much does that play into overall educational success and good outcomes generally professionally in life?
It's huge. And candidly, this is a big part of the purpose, my mission in this book. Those are I call them the meta skills. I used calling them
Mm.
soft skills. And people said, no, they're not soft. They're really meta skills. They're those things that you can't really teach in a classroom,
Mm.
that come from experience, that come from mentors. So I have tried to condense my many years of both faith formation and learning in the corporate world into that roadmap, if you will. So what I lay out in the book, the foundation of the book is what to learn, how to learn, and why to learn. Let me start with why first, and then I'm going to come back to the what. The why to learn is, as you said, this idea of I use 3 things in the why to learn: collaboration, cultural literacy, and character. The collaboration, because we're in a bigger world, we have to work with others, we have to learn to get along and collaborate. The cultural literacy, because things like diversity are such a polarized word. I don't know how that's become polarized, but the idea is, forget about the polarization. I can learn more from someone not like me than someone just like me. And so that's what I'm encouraging in the idea of cultural literacy, to reach out and learn from others. And then finally, to your point, the character element, the integrity, humility, so critically important, gratitude, compassion, all of those things that as Catholics we tend to almost take for granted, but they're not really taught, and it's hard to teach those. So I outline those and the importance of those in the book as part of this platform of what to learn, how to learn, and why.
And how can a young person learn those things, effectively? It's hard for, I think, conventional schools to do so for a lot of reasons. We don't have to get into that too much, but what's the best way for a young person to learn those things, especially if they don't have the benefit of a solid father like you did, taking you to church every Sunday, teaching you how to be a man and do the right thing. If that person is not accessible to you, how can those values be transmitted?
That's my mission in the book. I also have a foundation that reaches into public schools and tries to give young people this advice, the same advice. Because let's face it, there's so many people without that mentor, without that father figure, without the family unit to be able to help them. We can't abandon them. They need it as much as anyone else. So that's exactly the target I'm trying desperately to reach with this book. And a big part of it, I mentioned I was going to come back to the what to learn. Can I share with you how that came about?
Absolutely.
Okay, you'll love this, and I don't tell this story, but I'm with family now, so I can
That's right.
I can share it. Um, a big part of my transformation and formation came from an experience that I had that was literally in a dream. And it sounds a bit crazy, but I had a dream shortly after being named CEO of 7-Eleven. And I thought, wow, this is a big responsibility. And you have the normal insecurities of, am I able to do this? Am I good enough? And in this dream, I had almost one of those out of body experiences. Our homily last Sunday talked about Christ reappearing, and he was dazzling. It was the dazzling bright light that he appeared with. Well, I had that experience in my dream. The idea of a light so bright you couldn't even stare at it, and a feeling of warmth and love that was just beyond description. And it was one of those dreams I didn't want to wake up. I kept saying, no, don't wake up. This is awesome. And I knew subconsciously I was still dreaming because I hadn't died, but but I wanted to finish the dream. And I was told that I had 3 things I had to accomplish, and I went off and I did 3 things. And each time I would come back, and I would feel this warm embrace and congratulations, you've passed the test. And the third test, candidly, was do something that I was given 2 sticks and said, create something that will change the world. Well, I came back with the 2 sticks in the sign of a cross. And after agonizing over how do I do this, I was overcomplicating it, but I came back with that simple solution. I was told, that's it. The answer is in simplicity and clarity, to be able to clearly understand a mission and to be able to communicate that mission in a very clear fashion. You didn't overcomplicate it. You've passed the test. I then woke up and I said, oh no, I didn't get my gift. I wanted my gift. I want to know what it was. And I immediately wrote down 3 things: change, confidence, and clarity. And I woke up my wife and I said, you got to hear this story. I just had this amazing dream, but I don't understand, and I didn't get my gift. And she said, well, what are the 3 words? And I said, change, confidence, and clarity. I don't know what that means. And she said, that is your gift. You have been able to embrace change from the time you were a child and turn horribly negative situations into positive and figure out a way to get through it to the positive outcome. That's what you are. That's who you are. You have a level of confidence that makes you think you can do anything, but somehow that confidence stops just short of arrogance, because it's probably the humility that you have to know you have more to learn that keeps you from crossing that line. And then finally, you have a way of taking really complex things and breaking down and making it simple. Because I know, she said, I know you're not that smart. So you have to take complex things and make them simple so you can understand them. I know you well enough. But those are your gifts. That's what makes you who you are. And so the best part of the story is I realized it was Christmas morning, and I literally had those gifts on Christmas morning. And so it sounds almost too cliche to be true, but it is absolutely true. And I took those three things and began to teach everyone I worked with, everyone that was, that I was helping in school. Embrace change, have confidence, and use clarity to get through any crisis at all or any opportunity at all. And you'll find that those three things work. They are the what to learn in my book. Because if we don't learn those three things, we won't be able to learn, and we won't be able to have that formation successfully. So I hope that story is helpful, maybe just a little inspiring for some, and that you'll find that they help your own personal success.
Jim, so good. Wow. We are on with Jim Keys. His new book is out. It's called Education is Freedom. Lots of good anecdotes like the one you just heard in Jim's book. I encourage you all to go out and buy it today. Jim, if adversity is so key to it in your own story, as you mentioned a couple of times, the ability to encounter a very challenging circumstance and work your way through it and overcome it. That's not what the culture says though, these days. I mean, what you hear is that, kids are fragile and they need to be protected, and they shouldn't have to go through challenging circumstances. If they do, sadly, it becomes kind of an excuse and a reason not to, perform at an elite level and somehow work your way through it. That's just not what you hear these days. I mean, how do you balance your message, which is kind of old school? It's about grit, it's about digging in, it's about working hard and powering through in a culture where those things aren't really celebrated as much as they used to be.
They aren't, and that's an important message of the book, that it doesn't matter what the change is. The idea is to teach our kids, our young people, teach ourselves that it's the way we respond to change, not the change that matters. And so I wouldn't wish that kind of adversity on anyone. I wouldn't want my friends' children or my children, I wouldn't want anyone to have to experience those things. But I still would want them to learn that change is opportunity. It equals opportunity. I've coined the expression CEO for, change equals opportunity, because so true. And it's at the heart of so many of our issues, because when change happens, it triggers fear.
Yeah.
And fear is just the killer. It's the worst. It is when you're a kid and you're afraid. You cry for mom, and she turns on the light, and you realize there's no monster under the bed. That's knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's really the core of what the book is all about, is turning fear into knowledge, and hope, fear into hope, actually, and misunderstanding into knowledge and clarity. It can change your life. It can change the world if we take it seriously.
Yeah, this is great. Let's go back to your story a little bit. So you wrap up at Columbia, you got your MBA, you went there for the JD, decided to skip that piece. What was your first job out of business school?
I ended up at Gulf Oil, and trust me, I didn't grow up as a little kid saying I want to be an oil guy. I grew up
Hmm.
in Central
Hmm.
Massachusetts. I didn't know what it was.
Hmm.
Beverly Hillbillies is about the closest I came to knowing what. And I ended up in Gulf Oil. That I thought they were going to send me to Texas, where I had done an internship. They sent me to corporate headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But it was a fabulous job. I was working for the chief financial officer, working on merger and acquisition analysis. And my secret at the time, and it's, timing is very important. I don't want to call it luck, because I worked really, really hard. But the timing of my first job coincided with the emergence of the personal computer. So I was in a group, a planning group, asked to run analysis of crude oil reserves against equity value of the competitors, so that Gulf could acquire another oil company cheaper than drilling for the crude. Pretty simple. I was able to run this analysis 30 minutes after the market closed, I'd have the report on the chief financial officer's desk, a report that would take a week otherwise for somebody manually to do all those calculations. And I was using a PC to do it. So I looked like a genius, but I was using technology. So you'll find a recurrent theme that my very first job, I used technology. Ultimately ended up at 7-Eleven. Gulf went through, again, another crisis. They went through a merger with Chevron. My job was uncertain. I was sitting on a repository of data for the company that 7-Eleven acquired to get into the oil business, called Citgo Petroleum. So I had all of this analysis about Citgo Petroleum, and they hired me to come in and be the head of strategic planning. I was still a kid.
Wow.
For Citgo Petroleum. Yeah, that's how I got to 7-Eleven, ironically.
That's interesting. So what was your first job at 7-Eleven? Did you go over as CEO, or were you ultimately promoted into that?
Oh gosh, no, I
didn't think
came
so.
in as into a subsidiary. Yeah, I wish it was that easy.
Yeah.
I came into a subsidiary
Right.
as the head of planning to help turn around. They had just bought this oil company, Citgo, and we did turn it around. We used data, again, technology, to be able to get data to turn around the company. And 7-Eleven then sold it. Again, change. But I embraced that change and stayed with 7-Eleven. They then let me run their retail gasoline business. So that's how my first official job within the 7-Eleven infrastructure was to run retail gasoline. They then, 7-Eleven then did a leverage buyout, loaded up with debt in 1987 when the market collapsed. And by 1991, 7-Eleven was bankrupt. Filed for Chapter 11 protection. Again, I'm saying, oh, man, I keep making these bad career moves. What's going on? And again, it turned out that my division during that crisis had outperformed all the other divisions. And so the new board came in, we emerged from bankruptcy, and the new board said, well, why don't you be now head of strategic planning for all of 7-Eleven, for all of the Southland Corporation going forward. So that was a promotion. That led to being chief financial officer, something that I was totally ill-equipped for. I was not an accountant, not a CPA, but I was able to then build the plan for the new 7-Eleven, finance the plan as chief financial officer. They made me then chief operating officer, so I was able to execute on the same plan, and then ultimately chief executive officer, and I was able to then sell the plan to the investment community and take the company to the next level. And the result was great. We ended up, during my term as CEO, we had a 10x increase in shareholder value and 10 years of improved same-store sales. So it was quite a turnaround, powered by technology. Again, the common theme.
Yeah, what a brilliant run. And going back to your change theme, how was 7-Eleven different at the conclusion of your time as CEO after all these executive roles you held there versus the company that you joined as an intermediate level team member?
Data-driven.
How did it change?
Data-driven. It was a data-driven company. Today, it is a data-driven company today. It was kind of flying by the seat of its pants back in the day. We didn't have software to be able to know what sold and what didn't sell. And candidly, my role model, I went to Japan. Japan came in and helped us emerge from bankruptcy, the licensee in Japan. I looked at 7-Eleven in Japan, and it was phenomenal. They had 1,000 square foot stores, so about a third of the size of 7-Elevens in the US. They did 4 times the volume per store. And most importantly, they were able to sell high quality fresh foods. It's hard to imagine sushi in a convenience store.
Yeah.
But 7-Eleven Japan sells restaurant quality sushi that I guarantee would rival any sushi restaurant here in the United States because of their use of technology to improve their distribution capability and production capability to deliver that product just in time. It was fascinating. So I took those learnings, brought them back to the United States, shared it with the rest of the 7-Eleven franchise worldwide, because we had stores in 18, 20 countries. And it led to that use of data to make more informed decisions, led to a pretty dramatic turnaround in the company.
Yeah, clearly. Wow. And it also goes back to your theme of engaging with people from different backgrounds, because you encountered the way 7-Eleven did business in Japan, and you brought it back to the United States, and you did so effectively. That's interesting. So 7-Eleven wasn't your last rodeo, though. Tell us about your career after that.
You're right. It wasn't my last rodeo. I'm still on the bull, in some ways, trying to stay on for 8 seconds, and now this
Yep.
time with a book. You can tell I live in Texas now.
Indeed.
Um, I then looked out at the horizon. I was still a fairly young guy. I was barely 50 years old, and I said, "What next?" I think I would like to take the learnings that I've had, fabulous learnings at 7-Eleven, clear knowledge of the power of technology, take that to a company that needs business transformation. So I actually had two targets. I had one, Radio Shack, and the other, Blockbuster, two quite challenged business transformations. And the reason for Radio Shack is that they grew up selling electronic parts and pieces, as you might remember, but they had become the largest retailer of phones in the world.
Wow.
And I thought, why should I have to use Apple, an iPhone, when I could back then keep my BlackBerry, but have it integrated with an HP computer and a Sony TV, so I can do the same things I do on Apple. I'll put a person in every store like a Genius Bar. That was the idea. And if you brought Blockbuster and Radio Shack together, you'd have, just like the Apple Store, in a way, hardware and software, but you're selling solutions. So every PC, every phone, every TV would have come with Blockbuster inside. That was the grand vision. It was maybe maybe a little too grand, and we were a little early because the internet connectivity wasn't quite there for it. Outselling those two things, I ended up in Carl Icahn's office. He was a big shareholder of Blockbuster. He said, "Forget the Radio Shack piece. Let's just do this for Blockbuster now, and don't worry about taking it private. Leave it public." He said, I'm a financial guy. You're the operator. Trust me." That was in hindsight a big mistake, because had we refinanced $1 billion of debt in Blockbuster's balance sheet, had we done that in 2007 when I arrived, we would have sailed right through the financial crisis of 08, 09 with no problem at all, because Blockbuster was a cash flow machine. The problem is we kept it a public company. We had that debt. The week I arrived, they had violated a bank covenant. The banks almost put us out of business then. I negotiated an extension until 2009. In hindsight, wish I hadn't, because by 2009, it was virtually impossible to refinance that debt. Again, crisis. What do you do? Woe is me. Some people would have their head down. Family, friends said bail, but I stayed the course. And it was hard to stay the course, but the outcome was good. We ended up with a successful restructuring, a sale to Dish Networks, and we saved 19,000 jobs at the time.
Wow, incredible. What year did you join Blockbuster?
2007.
Okay, so by that point, I'm just trying to recall from my own memory. I mean, were people still going to like a Blockbuster,
Oh, yeah.
brick and mortar store and picking up the DVD or whatever, and renting it? I mean, that was still the action at that point.
Oh, yeah. And
Okay.
streaming hadn't happened. The iPhone, to put it in context, the iPhone launched in 07,
Yeah.
the year I joined. So we didn't have apps. Apps were a brand new thing.
Yeah.
There were no smart TVs. We still had very severe buffering for Wi-Fi. I don't know if we were well, anyway, Wi-Fi was not very robust. So yeah, the first thing we did was acquire a streaming video company called MovieLink that was created by the studios. So we actually had strong competitive advantage versus Netflix. We had this thing called Total Access. So we had stores, by mail, like Netflix was doing at the time, kiosks like Redbox. So we had all three. And then we bought MovieLink, so we had Blockbuster On Demand, that we changed the name of Blockbuster On Demand, for streaming of new releases, something Netflix couldn't do. So we had a very compelling competitive advantage. but we had $1 billion on the balance sheet.
Right. Did
Now,
Netflix beat you to the mail rental scheme? You know,
they did.
yeah, I thought so. Okay.
They did, and there's a famous rumor out there that Netflix approached Blockbuster to sell the business to Blockbuster for $50 million. I don't know if you've ever heard that rumor.
Yes.
Okay, here's the reality. I think that happened. It was long before I got there. I
Okay.
got there in 07. This happened in the year 2000, 23 years ago. So for all of the geniuses who say Blockbuster is an idiot, they should have taken the offer. You should have bought Google at $10 a share. You know,
Yeah.
the same. It's the same thing. And it's one of those things. Hindsight's 2020. Netflix at the time had no capabilities that Blockbuster couldn't do themselves.
Right.
So I can't fault the management at the time for turning down that offer.
So that's very interesting, and I didn't realize that Blockbuster was so well poised in that era around 2007. You know,
Yes,
with mail rentals, with streaming capability. I mean, you guys were kind of ready for the next generation of consumer product in this space. Where did Blockbuster, I guess, because I guess why wasn't it able to capitalize on those advantages that were replaced at that point? Like, why isn't Blockbuster the dominant streaming provider today?
let me give you an example. If you had a house and you put a variable rate mortgage on that house
Yeah.
2 years ago at 3.5%, and now all of a sudden your interest rate's 9%, you've got to figure out how to pay that extra mortgage every month.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what Blockbuster faced. I mean, they had $1 billion of debt at 6% money. And now all of a sudden you're in 2009 and that 6% money had to be refinanced. We refinanced a portion of it at 12.
Okay.
It was a cash flow problem.
Very interesting. And you
Pure and
saved
simple. Yeah.
you
Huge
saved
lesson
19.
there, by the way, for other
Yeah.
companies that are going through that right now
Right.
with higher interest rates.
Yeah, yeah. No, let's not lose that point. You're right. I mean, that is a lesson because there's a lot of that going on right now. You're absolutely right.
Exactly.
Save 19,000 jobs. That's interesting. How'd you do that? How'd you save all those jobs?
Well, we kept the company alive. There
Yeah.
was a tremendous amount of pressure to liquidate the company. A Chapter
Yeah.
7 liquidation is a total liquidation. It just goes away forever. We had some very strong strategic partners. We had Google we were talking to. We were talking to AT&T, DirecTV, Dish Network, all potential distribution partners to help Blockbuster make that transformation. We had content, but we didn't have the distribution platform. So a distribution partner like Google would have been fabulous. They were going to put YouTube side by side with Blockbuster. The landscape for streaming video would be entirely different than it is today if we had accomplished that. But right about that time, the financial markets collapsed and everyone knew we were going to struggle refinancing that debt. So the rumors of bankruptcy started to float, and that killed a couple of those deals. Dish stayed with stayed at the table, helped us take the company through a restructuring, succeeded at the end in avoiding a liquidation, and they acquired the company in about 2011, I think it was 2010. Now, ultimately, Dish decided to close down the stores for an entirely different reason. Their vision was to take Blockbuster straight to mobility. They believed, and they still believe, I think, the power of mobility beyond 5G, if you will. And that capability technically existed then, but the government wasn't releasing that bandwidth capability at the time. A whole host of reasons that probably happened. But if you think about it, dial forward, just today we're barely at 5G. So the leaders of Dish were actually very far ahead of their time. They wanted to accelerate that availability of better bandwidth via mobility and make it just super easy for people to download content via their phone and then upload it to any device. That was their vision. When they saw that bandwidth wasn't going to change, they shut down the stores and retrenched. So will they ever bring back the Blockbuster brand? They still own it. I don't know. It would be interesting to see. I hope they do someday.
I could see it working out. I mean, people love retro stuff, right? I mean, like,
They do.
We just released Top Gun, a couple of years ago. It was the best movie ever made. Remakes from the '80s. I could see it working out, Jim. Absolutely,
Exactly.
very
Never know.
interesting.
Maybe they'll bring me back to be CEO of Blockbuster again.
It could happen, Jim.
It could happen.
My friend, let me tap into, because our audience are entrepreneurs and executives and CEOs and startup people, and just give us an anecdote, I guess. You mentioned like the meeting with Carl Icahn. You've been in these C-suite roles at these big companies. You've dealt with big challenges and overcome them. What are the qualities you look for in the executives and I guess the middle managers that you hired and trained and promoted? Just describe to us the profile of the men and women that you respected a lot, that you look to in these management roles you had.
Going back to the acronym CEO, change equals opportunity. If you've got the ability to manage change and not put your head down, so many people freeze up in fear. They're worried about their job. They're worried about the future, et cetera, et cetera. Corporations, business is all about change. And so
Yeah.
I'd like to find people that are willing to see change as opportunity, and have the confidence to power through and the clarity to be able to communicate. That's both outbound and inbound. So it's listening as well as being able to clearly communicate a vision and a plan. Those are such essential characteristics. But then I also look to the why elements, the collaboration. Are they willing to work with the team, or are they a professional golfer versus a hockey player that leads the team, right? And there are a lot of professionals that have characteristics of one versus the other. So try to find that team player, someone who respects cultural literacy, that can get along, because business is going to be increasingly global. Let's face it, it is today. It's shocking, but it's not getting the world isn't getting any smaller. So we have to learn how to collaborate and understand other cultures better. And then finally, the character piece. If you can't trust the people you're working with, and if they don't have that compassion, if they don't have gratitude, if they don't have those fundamentals that we live as part of the Catholic faith, if they don't have that, then, and they don't have to be Catholic to have that,
Right.
But if they don't, it makes it very difficult for them to succeed, or for you to be able to work with them going forward. So those are some of the elements that I look for.
No, that's
And
really
I'm
well
not
said.
always successful.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm not a great judge of character or integrity. I've been burned in the past, and I tend to trust sometimes too much. So it's hard. The people piece is probably the hardest. What I've found to be one of the most challenging elements of business.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, humility and gratitude aren't important because the Catholic Church teaches them. They're important because they're important, and the Catholic Church just happens to emphasize them. They can come from a lot of different places. Other religions, the military tradition. There's all kinds of subcultures in human life that value these things and teach them. Catholic Church just happens to be among them, which is beautiful. Jim, you have so many extracurricular interests beyond your corporate background. Far too many for us to explore in the time that we have together today. But I did want to touch upon space, because I know you recently were at NASA, and I'm a space enthusiast myself, and I love that stuff. Talk to us a little bit about your interest in space and what you're doing in the space stuff right now.
Well, I grew up. My interest in space started as a kid. I grew up in the Gemini and Apollo era, and watched those guys walking on the moon, and I wanted to be an astronaut. And you need that spark growing up as a kid to say, why should I study? Why is school important? Well, that was my spark. I thought, if these guys can do it, they're not rich. They didn't come from fancy families. Maybe that's my path. I'll go be an astronaut. Well, my eyes weren't good enough to get into ROTC and fly fighter jets. So I became a pilot as an avocation, and have stayed with it, and I still fly today. But dial forward 30, 40 years, and I was honored at one point by an organization called the Ratio Algebra Association in Washington, D.C. And in my class that year, they select 10 people each year to recognize who have come from very humble beginnings and accomplished a lot. Here's the guy in my class, Buzz Aldrin. And and I got to stand on stage and thank Buzz for being the inspiration for me to even be there. And so he and I became fast friends, and we got to know each other over the years. And through him, I was blessed to be able to meet several other of the Apollo astronauts and other astronauts, shuttle astronauts, et cetera. I started working a little bit with NASA. And just recently, I had, and this is one of those pinch yourself moments, and you'll find I feel like the Holy Spirit follows me around. I don't know why, because this stuff doesn't happen to normal people. I have been so blessed. But I had a chance, knowing that I was launching this book and that I was trying to find ways to get awareness of education as freedom. Charlie Duke, I had a chance to go on the zero gravity flight in weightlessness and with Charlie and toss him the book in zero gravity. And it just by coincidence, it timed right so that I was able to pick him up in Greenville, South Carolina, fly to NASA, and with Charlie Duke, you get to, well, I asked permission to fly on the shuttle landing strip. So I land my plane right on the shuttle landing strip. They call out the NASA fire truck, and we're able to have the water fountain treatment and just an amazing experience there at NASA. That was the same day that the Intuitive Machines flight landed on the moon. So I was able to watch that moon landing with the guy who was there 50 years before. It was one of those truly pinch yourself moments. We together filmed a video for Cam Ghaffarian, the founder of Intuitive Machines. And I said, Cam, I'm here with the guy that inspired me in such a way that I'm even here today. And we both have the privilege of congratulating you on a successful moon landing. And it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to be able to do something like that. As a space geek, I'm sure you can appreciate it.
I can appreciate it, and I'm so jealous. It's amazing. Thank you for sharing it. Oh my gosh. I hope
Sure.
it's not your final zero G flight, Jim. I hope you go even higher next time.
Well, it could be in the cards. One never knows.
We'll never know. You got a lot of road ahead of you. So let's go back to the book. You know, in our final few minutes here, education is freedom. And I think what I'm hearing from you, Jim, is that education is freedom in a way is kind of a reflection, but also kind of a statement of what you want to accomplish or part of what you want to accomplish in the balance of your life. And it's really rooted in your life story that a person of modest circumstances and unpredictable challenges as a young person can rise up and lead a remarkable life of aspiration and do great things and lead others and give back to your community and fly in space and do all the things that a young person dreams of. That is accessible to anyone. Anybody can do these things, and you know a little bit about how to do it. That's what you're trying to do with education is freedom, right?
That's exactly right. It's thankfully I was inspired as a child, and but for that inspiration and the use of knowledge to be able to ultimately do all of these things, and I'm still learning. That's how I can get in my airplane and fly anywhere, because I have to train every year. Knowledge was the big difference, and I want to inspire others to be able to enjoy that kind of opportunity. And it's not about money. So often we think jobs and careers, it's just about I want to make more money. No. The only difference between me and my brothers and sisters is it's not really the money, it's the freedom that I have, the freedom to do anything I wish to do. And if I don't know how to do it, I know how to learn to do it. And that's a big difference. So I want to inspire others to be able to live their full life at any age, not just young people.
Okay, so who should read your book? I mean, obviously anyone, is the answer, but who do you think it's going to make most of a difference with in terms of your mission, in terms of transforming education and opening up more possibilities for people that might not have them otherwise? Who do we need to get the book into the hands of today, Jim, in order to make the changes you'd like to see?
So I'm going to start backwards. Usually I start with the young people, but I'm going to start with those in the final third, people like me, the last part of their life. I have learned that I can do anything. And if I want to go experience a foreign country, I learned that my experience in Japan was so much more robust just by learning a little Japanese, because I would understand the culture, not just the language. And I encourage people in that final third of their life to expand their life by learning more and find something that you're passionate about. Art, music, whatever it is, another country, language, travel, but go back to learning, because many of us just forget those fundamentals: curiosity, creativity. Um, those are the things that I'd encourage. So that's for the older folks like me. The middle people in the middle of their life. Often, when I got out of school, I thought, okay, I'm done. But my college degree and my graduate degree were really a license to learn, to keep learning. And throughout my career, I had to keep learning. Think of a doctor if they didn't have to go for annual medical proficiency learning. They have to do that all the time. But many professions, many people don't keep learning. So I encourage that ability to transform your life is still there, even in the middle of your life. I just ran into someone last night at a book signing, went back to school to get a graduate degree at 50 years old. And she now wants to take a whole new career path. That's an example of the book. But the last one I want to take is to the young people, because what I pray is that this book isn't just for you. I want that person, maybe my age, or that person in the middle of their life, to read the book and then please give it away. Maybe buy 2 copies, that's fine, but give one away, because my ultimate dream is that this book ends up in the hands of someone who needs it, probably young person, high school, college, doesn't know if they are right for school, doesn't know if knowledge is that important. They're dealing with a narrative today that it's not relevant anymore in today's world. You will change their life by helping them with this roadmap. I'm confident of that. So I pray that people will want to join my mission in helping others be inspired and find their own path to success.
I love that, Jim. And you've mentioned it a couple of times that you have concern that there's a force within our society today that says that education is no longer important. You've mentioned that a couple of times. That's clearly a concern of yours, and that's clearly the antithesis of the message of your book. Where is that coming from? Why would anyone say that education is not important?
There's a very strong narrative now, and these things have a way of taking on a life of their own. It's caused by fear. There is fear that teachers are not doing their job. They're indoctrinating children. They're teaching bad stuff. They're, doing all kinds of things. There's fear that colleges have become liberal institutions of blah, 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 blah. This is all fear-based. And I share with my Christian friends, if you're really strong in your faith, you're not going to be afraid of someone else corrupting your faith. You're going to be strong enough to know that no one can change that. And it's the same. We've got to counter these fears that are leading to people, very well respected people in society, saying, you're better off not going to college. And while that's fine for some, my objective is to make everybody realize you can do anything you want. And there's always that vocation to fall back on. But strive for the best you can be and try to find the best college you can get into, because it will transform your life. I believe that's a much better narrative than discouraging. You give a kid an excuse not to go to school, they're going to take it. Right? So I'm trying to counter that narrative that's out there. In fact, I just got off an interview this morning, 30-minute interview. It was all a debate about it's just not important anymore. And it's pretty frightening to dial forward 20, 30, 40 years and see where we are as a country if our education does not continue to grow.
Yeah, well said. And Jim, we're at the end of our time, so we can make this a quick one, but I do want to get your read on this. the transformation of education that you call for in Education is Freedom on the systems level. Let's imagine, blue sky, Jim's the king of the world. He can do anything he wants tomorrow. What's step one? What's the first change that you would implement in terms of the transformation of education you think is so important?
Integration of software tools to make educational tools as compelling and engaging as video games. The same kids that didn't want to study played video games for hours because the graphics are eye-popping. They have incentives. They win hat for their avatar. We could take scholarships from the end of the learning experience, which is what we grant now, and bring them back to the beginning. Give a kid in the 6th or 7th grade 20 cents because they passed an online exam. And then while they're studying, take them right into an operating room instead of showing them a graphic of an operation. The possibilities are unlimited to capture their imagination, ignite their curiosity, trigger their creativity, all of this stuff, and their basic learning process can be lit up with the power of technology. So that would be my first mission. And my call to action is for companies to invest in this, particularly the tech companies coming together and collaborating rather than being strictly in their silos for profit. They could collaborate on educational tools.
Wow, Jim, I hope they do. I want to respect your time because you've been so generous with it. We've been on with Jim Keys, the author of Education is Freedom, retired CEO of 7-Eleven and Blockbuster, and a number of other interesting roles and contributions throughout his storied career. Jim, for our audience to continue the conversation with you, get to know you, do you have a website, social media presence? Just talk to us about how we can keep this going.
Sure, it's jameswkeys.com. And that's my website. And then I'm at jkeys author, Keyes, jkeys author, on Instagram and TikTok. I've become a social media person. I went from 0 to 15,000 followers overnight. So I think the book is hopefully catching on.
I hope it will too. And it's available wherever books are sold, folks. So go out and buy a couple copies and give one to a friend. We've been on with Jim Keys. This is the Faith and Finance Forum, hosted by the Catholic Finance Association and presented by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. Thanks so much to our guest today, Jim Keys. God bless you all. Have a good Lent. Happy Easter. God bless.